Hello there. I see first people are already joining. Hello, Dante, for example. So, yes, welcome to today's episode of a series which will probably have like 4 episodes in total. We'll have to see how we progress in this because with this series, what we want to do is we actually want to go through the whole process and actually quite raw in a sense of working on porting the Lorem Ipsum plugin for Adobe XD that I have developed and which is open source over to an add-on for Adobe Express. So me, that is Zuri Klaschka, pronouns are they, them, or she, her. I'm a developer from Würzburg in Germany, and yeah, I've been within this Adobe ecosystem since around 2018. I've also worked for 2 years at Adobe from 2021 to 2023, and now I'm freelancing again and building plugins and add-ons for various Adobe products and also some other stuff for customers and also as products that I can sell. So with that, that's pretty much me. And yeah, I'll just wait for another couple of minutes just so that everybody can come in and join us here. And then we can actually also dive right in and get started. So maybe a few more things around how all this stuff will work. Truthfully, I don't have too much of an idea. And the reason for that is actually that we want this to actually be this raw experience. So, for example, it might be that we get stuck on a problem for half an hour, then we get stuck on a problem for half an hour. And that's totally fine because that's just a part of the development journey that we go through for these add-ons. So, at the moment, of course, I have some ideas. I knew we would do this stream, of course. So with that, I already thought about a few things. But at the same time, I really don't have an exact plan of, okay, this is what I want to achieve today, or this is what I want to achieve in the second episode or so. So with that, we'll get from figuring out what kinds of things are possible with the SDK available for Express over to how we can adapt the experience of the Lorem Ipsum plugin that was built for Adobe XD to make sense within the Adobe Express ecosystem, so to speak, because, of course, users will have a different way of using Express that they will have with Adobe XD. So, some things we might have to adapt and actually developing it. In the end, we'll probably also do an episode which will just contain basically the lessons learned and be a little bit more focused, so to speak, to actually encompass what are the key takeaways of this, because I also haven't built a full Express add-on yet. So with that, this will be my first fresh experience, so to speak, as a UXP first developer building an add-on for Express. So I hope we can find some key takeaways there that will hopefully also be able to help some of you if you might be a UXP developer who's looking into building their first add-on. And yeah, we'll just have to see how it goes, really. So yeah. Let me see how we're doing time-wise. Okay, so maybe let's wait 1 more minute, and after that we can actually dive right into things. Also, by the way, I'll have a look on the chat now and then, but as compared to, for example, office hours formats hosted by Adobe and things like that, the key focus today and in the coming sessions will basically be to get through this experience and just share that journey, so to speak. So with that, while I might be able to answer some questions, and there are also some folks from Adobe active in the chat, for example, Romuald, yeah, really the key focus here is we can look into this journey, and yeah, of course you can also discuss things with other people in the chat. That's totally fine. But yeah, just as a heads up, I won't be constantly monitoring the chat and answering all the questions and so on. Also because, as I said, this will be my first Express add-on as well. So yeah, and I can see that there's also somebody in the YouTube chat who's joined, who's excited for UXP. So while we will, of course, look into UXP by porting the plugin from UXP, today we'll be focused on Express, which is actually based on the web extensibility platform, which is yet another thing. So basically, it's one step further, so to speak. So our CEP for desktop apps got not replaced yet, but UXP got introduced as a modern alternative to CEP, and now for the web-based Express, we actually have yet another extensibility platform. All right, and Kamalakas has joined us as well, so welcome to you. And yeah, let's maybe just get started. So I'll start sharing my screen in the hopes that everything works as I, yeah, planned this, or not exactly planned it, but something similar to that, as I said. So yeah, here we are, I guess. And the first thing we may want to take a look at is just what we're starting off with. So basically, the existing plugin for Adobe XD. You can also find this plugin, by the way, on my GitHub profile. As I said, it's fully open source. So it's just under Klaschka /Lorem-Ipsum-plugin, the GitHub repository. I can also maybe just post a link to that in both chats. And then, yeah, let's just have a look at how this plugin works in Adobe XD and some of the code, and then we'll go on from there. So if I now open Adobe XD, you can see that I already have this plugin loaded right here. And as you can see, I prepared some lower thirds format that I forgot to use today, but oh well. And then if I have an artboard here, and maybe let's just disable the grid, and I add a little bit of text, which is white for now, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Then you can see that I can just run the Lorem Ipsum plugin. We get asked for a couple of options, so we can specify one of various placeholder texts. We can specify if we want to end with a punctuation mark. So let's say we want to end with a period. We want to include line breaks, and we want to trim the text area to fit its inserted text, which it will do in this case anyway, since it's an auto-scale text area, but that was from a time when Adobe XD didn't support that. And then if we go to insert text, thankfully it still works. I haven't tested out this before today, but yeah, that works, and it inserts this placeholder text. So yeah, with that, it's really quite a simple plugin, but then again, we also have the option to, which is a little bit easier than creating a bunch of text, create a rectangle and replace that with placeholder text, which then has some default styling, but yeah, it's not perfect, but it's an option if you want to use it. And yeah, it has a couple of other options. So for example, it always remembers the last settings. That's also maybe something that we have to look into, how we can do this in an Express add-on. So if I now were to select another placeholder text here, inserted that text and tried it again here, you can see that we retain these kinds of options also across restarts of Adobe XD, by the way. And yeah, there really isn't too much to it, but then again, we want to do this in like 3 to 4 sessions. We don't want to have 50 sessions just for developing this. So yeah, it's a small plugin, but it's it has quite a bunch of users. I don't have the exact numbers in mind right now, but yeah, that's what it is. And hopefully at the end of this series, we'll have something somewhat similar to this as an add-on for Adobe Express, which we can then also publish as an add-on there in the marketplace. So, yeah. All right. Next up, since of course we want to at least look into if we can reuse some of the code, we'll probably not be able to develop it in a way where we can just use the same code for both platforms. That might be possible, but it's not the best idea, in my opinion, to do this from the get-go. So yeah, let's maybe just have a look at the code and see which parts of it we might want to reuse, which parts of it don't make sense to reuse, and so on, which seems like a sensible step, or at least it's a sensible step in my opinion. And since this is a stream of how I do it, even if you disagree, well, I'm sorry about that. That's how we'll do it. So I have the code for the Lorem Ipsum plugin right here. As you can see, we have this main.ts, so it's all based on TypeScript, by the way. And yeah, so basically all that happens is when somebody selects this option of running Lorem Ipsum, we run this Lorem function right here. It loads a bunch of localization, so the plugin is actually localized into different languages. We might be able to look into if we want to do this at the end of the series, but it might not be our first priority, so to speak. And then while handling any errors that might occur there, which is kind of a workaround for Adobe XD. So actually you can imagine this to be a try catch, which just shows an error dialog if something happens. We check if the selection is compatible. We can also look into this method later. If it isn't compatible, so if we haven't selected anything which we can work with, we show a selection error. Otherwise, we get the options which we were able to specify in the modal. So we show our modal. If we don't get any options, then we have to just abort, because yeah, we can't work without options. And then last but not least, we apply Lorem Ipsum. Easier said than done, of course. There is a bunch of logic within these methods, but that's the overall structure. And I think mostly we will be able to have a similar structure, at least, within Express. As I said, I haven't built an add-on yet, so I might be completely wrong about this, but this feels like something which I want to at least stick somewhat closely to, just so that if I decide to rebuild it in a way where code is shared between both platforms at some point, it isn't quite as difficult to create compatibility there. Then we can have a look at how all these UI things are done. So for example, show selection error. This just shows an error dialog, which in turn uses a library that I actually developed for specific to Adobe XD plugins. So we'll probably won't be able to use that if I remember correctly, because I think add-ons, so let me just open some add-on. I think this is an iframe, right? So with that, yeah, it is an iframe. So with that, any dialog we show would be contained to within that. So we probably won't be able to go with that option, but yeah, we can just as well show this in the panel. So yeah, no harm done there. So just showing a little bit of an error dialog. Then our options modal also shows this kind of dialog. If you remember, if we go back to Adobe XD, select something, that's just this dialog right here. And in one way or another, we will have to do this within Adobe Express as well. So just giving the user the option to select the placeholder text, selecting how to end the placeholder text, and so on. So yeah, in one way or another, we'll probably have to have this as well. I would imagine that it will just have to be a panel within Adobe Express, which I'm not the biggest fan of, I will admit, because also back when, a little anecdote here, back when panels got released to Adobe XD, everyone was very excited about panels being a thing, and everyone was like, hey, you have to port your plugin to a panel. I never did with Lorem Ipsum. I built some other panel plugins, but to me, Lorem Ipsum always felt like something that, you know, it's kind of a one-off action. You say, okay, now I want to insert placeholder text, so I get these options, then I press enter or click insert text, and then I don't need that UI anymore. Like, Lorem options for placeholder text to me never felt like something that should take up screen real estate for longer than it has to. And so with that, it always made sense to have this in a modal more so than in a panel. So I might want to look into how I can still keep that philosophy to some degree, hopefully, within Adobe Express. That's just something we have to find out as this journey progresses. Yeah, then we just get all this kind of text. So yeah, let me quickly, yeah, and that's another thing. As I said, these settings are retained, so that that will be something we have to look into, how we can achieve that in Express. And maybe I'll just open, we can actually do this in Express, just having a document here. So what did we say? We wanted to figure out like the UI side of things, so panel, modal, etc. Then what do we want? We want to look into how we can save the settings. Save settings. And of course, the core functionality of the Lorem Ipsum plugin, quite obviously, is interacting with text layers within the document. So with that, inserting, editing text layers. So I'm just making a few notes here for myself, and conveniently we can just do this in Adobe Express about what are the things that I want to look out for while browsing through the documentation and figuring out what kinds of things are possible. Let me see if I forgot something important. So yeah, basically we just save these settings, return these options here, and then we go into this whole apply Lorem Ipsum or show selection error. And the way this works within the Lorem Ipsum plugin is we have a function that can actually return a bit of placeholder text with a specific length. So this is probably this get Lorem Ipsum right here. So we have get text with a length. And then we just add this termination string, which is like the period or the hyphen or whatever we selected. So get text, then trims a text to n number of words, which is just another function. If the text ends with one of these termination symbols, then it should strip that away from it. And last but not least, it is returned. So yeah, it's really not too complicated. The texts are also just loaded from a JSON file, which we can just copy over. So yeah, that's not too difficult. I think we can just copy and paste all this kind of code over. We of course won't be able to show a Lorem Ipsum options modal, but we, I think, only use this here as a TypeScript for the type definitions. So that also isn't too much of an issue, I guess. So yeah, I think that really shouldn't be too much of an issue. And then in this Lorem Ipsum folder, we have a bunch of strategies. So it's not really precisely a strategy pattern in terms of computer science. Like, it is slightly adapted, but it's very close to just being a strategy pattern. So with that, we have an interface with apply lorem ipsum strategy, which then has a single function, apply, which takes the options, which tries to apply its strategy of applying placeholder text to our selection with the given options. And if it fails to do so, the promise is, I think, rejected, or it just resolves to false. And with that, it basically tries to, and let me quickly see if I can find the correct file here. It tries several strategies and just uses the first that doesn't fail, so to speak. So with this auto-length lorem ipsum strategy, our apply just consists of, we try to create a new strategy which actually fails. So the constructor actually throws an error. That was how we did this. And then if this strategy feels like it's compatible, then it will try to apply this. If this fails in the constructor, then it will try this strategy. If this fails, then it will try this strategy. If this fails, then and so on, until last but not least, we have found a strategy that we can use and actually apply it with our given options. So that's the general mechanism of how we actually interact with the document. And so, for example, if we have a point text, so in Adobe XD, that would be a text that doesn't have any text area associated with it, so I can't specify a width or a height of this text node right here, then it would use this. And so if we click into this, no, I want to actually open this up, if I may. Okay, let's just do it like this. So the point text strategy essentially checks if our selection, our selected node, is an instance of text. If it isn't, then it isn't a text node, and so it also isn't a point text node, so we throw. If it isn't of the type point, then it is not a point text node, and last but not least, we say this dot text node, so we essentially say we have our compatible node, and then in apply, we just apply text to it with 2 words of lorem ipsum. This might also be something which we have to look into creating a better experience around, because I received so many support requests around, hey, why does the Lorem Ipsum plugin only generate 2 words of Lorem Ipsum? The answer for that is because you created point text in Adobe XD, so maybe we can find some better strategy there to just make it clearer to the user why that happens. And yeah, for the other things, it's a little bit more complicated, because we essentially do a binary search to find the most words that fit within the given dimensions of a text area. So as you can see here, if I now make this a little bit smaller and apply placeholder text again, it inserted exactly so much text that it still fits within this text area. And so depending on how the APIs for Express look like, that might also be something that we can do over in Express with our add-on. But yeah, that's just something we have to figure out with the APIs. And then applying the text is actually basically the only real interaction with document, and it's quite simple. Adobe XD has this weird, or not weird, but in terms of programming, weird concept of a repeat grid, which was a small edge case around how you can apply text to a text layer in Adobe XD, so that's this part. Hopefully we won't even need that, and then we will just have something similar to this, so just applying the text once we have found the right amount of text. Okay, so while this of course was not fully comprehensive of everything the plugin does, that's the main gist of it at least. And so with that, what I now want to do is just to look into the documentation for Adobe Express add-ons, so developeradobe.com, Express add-ons, docs, guides, or probably SDK references, and just have a look around what kinds of things we might be able to do here and what we might have to adjust in one way or another. Also, if sooner or later somebody in the chat could give me a signal if the text size is readable to you, so if you can read that, that would be great. But yeah, until that point, I'll just begin looking into this. So what I already know, what I've already heard, was that we have to use the document sandbox to interact with our document. And I think that's the first thing I want to figure out, is this inserting and editing text layers, how we can do that. So it will probably happen in the document sandbox. So yeah, let me just try to get an overview for that. Okay, we have some kind of different file. And thank you, it should be a little bit zoomed in. So yeah, let's do it like that. Hopefully that will be better. And yeah, so we apparently have a separate file that will then contain our document sandbox code. I'm currently thinking that I might go with Bolt Express, which is a boilerplate developed by Justin Taylor, I think, who's also from the developer community. That will just help us set up things like TypeScript and so on a little bit easier. So hopefully we won't have to deal too much with that part, but yeah, we have to see about that. Code samples we can maybe look into later, but for now I already know what I want to look for. So communication APIs. Okay, I guess we just have some sort of communication between the document model sandbox or document sandbox and the iframe where the add-on is running specifically. So I guess it's just a sort of back and front end kind of thing where you can call things that manipulate the document from the iframe, which is also interesting for us because it means that we have to find a place where we can do the separation well within our code. But this should actually be pretty easy, I think, because we have this clear boundary of showing the UI, if we remember back in the main TS. So we first show our UI, and nothing of that actually needs a whole lot of document interaction. We might have to check if we have a compatible selection, but that can just be a function call, I guess. And then at this point, we pass these options, and then probably everything that this apply lorem ipsum function does can be handled, apart from maybe showing the selection error within the document sandbox. So I think we're actually pretty well set up for that already. All right, so then we just, we get some sort of API proxy, and then we perform work on a document, which, yeah, it's just a function over there. So with that, I would assume that we can just write functions. Presumably, we can't pass everything. Data types. We can't pass every data type because, like, cyclic data types are probably not easily serializable, but yeah, so we can basically pass these kinds of things. We can also pass an error, which might be great. I'm trying to figure out if we actually need any asynchronous things for the document sandbox, but presumably these APIs are just synchronous, and so with that we don't even have to deal with promises in that regard. web APIs. Okay, we can do console logging. That's all I need for debugging, really. By the way, I'm not really a big user of breakpoints in the code and so on. But yeah, so document APIs, okay. Editor, context, insertion parent. So we have to basically figure out what an insertion parent is, but that won't be the biggest issue. And then we can just create a rectangle. So presumably we can also just create text, I hope. All right, tutorials. Classes. Let's have a look. Add-on data sounds interesting in terms of saving our settings. So let's have a look at that. Add-on data class provides APIs to read, write, remove private metadata to a node. Okay, I actually don't really want to do this with a node, so we might have to look into another place for that, but worst case, we could probably even just use local storage natively because we're in a browser. Artboard list, artboard node sounds like something we might have to deal with. So this extends visual node. So let's just maybe go through the hierarchy and try to understand what nodes are. So add-on data, all children, ID, parent, type. So basically just a document object model. I don't think we'll have to deal with the root node. So with that, and probably also not a page node. So let's just look at a visual node. Add-on data, all children, bounds and locals, and parent, top left local. So this seems to then be something that is positioned somewhere in the document. Yeah, and just to explain how I'm looking at this right now, I'm really just quickly having a look around and trying to get a sense for how these APIs are structured. It's extended by node. Is that then? Yeah, okay, that seems to be like the central root class, so to speak, for all these things. A node represents an object in the scene graph. The document's visual content tree, most tangible visual content, is a subclass of a node, fair enough, but note that some abstract top-level structural nodes, such as page node, only extend a more minimal visual node or base node. Okay. That's something I have to remember. Like, node isn't the same as base node. That's kind of... okay. Just something I have to keep in mind. Then on extend face node, as a general rule, if you can click or drag an object with the select move tool in the UI, then it extends from node. Fair enough. I can select text, so I assume it extends a node. A node's parent is always a visual content node, but may not be another node. Fair enough. Okay, and then we actually have the text node. So let's have a look what we have here. Add-on data, storing some metadata, but it's experimental only and should not be used for any add-ons you will be distributing. So with that, even if I wanted to use it, the main goal for the series is to, at the end of it, publish this add-on. So yeah, we won't be using that. All children makes sense. So it's quote unquote only an iterable. So dealing with the APIs around that will be a little bit more complicated, but that's all right. I mean, worst case, we can just put it into an array. Blend mode, fair enough. Normal graphics app stuff. Bounce and parent makes sense. Bounce and local or bounce local. So yeah, apparently we also have like a local and a global coordinate system of some type, which makes sense. I already know this from XD. Center point local also makes sense. All of these things really are familiar from any visual app that has add-ons, may that be building stuff with CEP and extend script, may that be UXP. The things really are just familiar. Okay, nice, we have an ID. Not that we'll use it, but It's nice to know that every node has a unique identifier. It can be locked, also not something we'll use, but great. Opacity, we can retrieve the parent, which might be undefined. Let me try to make, okay, nodes that have been deleted or orphans with a parent chain that terminates in undefined without reaching the root node. Ah, okay, so if we already deleted the node but still have a reference to it in code, then it might be undefined. Fair enough. I was just like, hey, if this is not the root node, how can it be undefined? But fair enough. Rotation, all right. Rotation in screen. Yeah, probably also like local and global coordinate system, I guess, to change rotation by, yeah, local rotation angle and total rotation angle. Fair. And both are just read-only, I guess, because it only has a getter. Wait, are all of these just read-only? Yeah, opacity has a setter, so with that, apparently, I mean, that we might have to use something else to set a parent is to be expected, but that we can't set the rotation. Yeah, we'll have to look into that more, probably later, if we want to adapt the functionality where we can replace a rectangle, because if I now create a rectangle over in XD and rotate it and replace it with placeholder text, then of course we have to retain and with that reapply that rotation. So that's something we might have to look deeper into. Top left local, okay, again, some positioning stuff. We have a transformation matrix, also get only. Top left local is also get only, okay. Translation, we can actually set. So the translation along its parent axis, this is identical to the translation component of the transform matrix. Fair enough. Okay, so with that, we can set some translation. What does it take as a value? Value is a point. Okay, so that's just the position, basically. So the translation, fair. Type, nodes type, okay. So probably with that, we can also check if something has type text node or stuff like that. Wait, do not depend on the literal values of constants. Yeah, makes sense. Additional node types may be added in the future. Makes sense. Visual root, the highest ancestor that still has visual precedence in the document. Typically an artboard, but for an orphaned content, it will be the root of the deleted content. Okay, fair enough. So probably just some sort of root node, but not the actual root node, but one layer beneath that. The first thing that you can place stuff into, I guess. Methods, bounce in node, local point in node, convert. Okay, those are like conversion functions. Remove from parent. Yeah, with that we can then manipulate the parent. Set position in parent. Fair enough. Okay, we can set the rotation. Perfect. And that's that, I guess. Next up, what's interesting to us is a text node. At least I assume that's what I created here. Class text node. A text node represents the text display frame in the scene graph. It may display an entire piece of text or sometimes just a subset of longer text that flows across multiple text node frames. Okay, so probably like InDesign, where you can continue text. That might be complicated. Not something I had to deal with in XD, but yeah. Maybe let's note that down. Multi-frame text nodes, or whatever they were called. So how would this look like? Can I like reproduce this scenario, so to speak, within Express? That's rotation. I mean, in XD we have this little thing at the bottom right to continue the text. So recommended. Yeah, truthfully, that's an Express feature that I've never used before and never seen before. So with that, yeah, as I said, this is raw. So it can also consist of stuff like that, where we now have to just figure out how this actually looks like and what this means feature-wise to then work with that in our code. So is this something I can do with text? Also doesn't necessarily look like it. File replace, log allow text Okay, that might also be interesting. Allow any length. Okay. Text in Express has a few more options than I originally thought. So yeah, that's not bad, but it might mean that we are probably going to have a few more edge cases, I guess. Okay, here's text flow. So let's look at that. Text flow. Yeah, now we have like a 1 here. And then we can add a new text box, and I assume that it then, yeah, it continues the text in the second text box. Okay. Just to let you in on what I'm thinking about, or I'm just gonna think out loud. I'm not quite sure if I want to support this in like the first version, just because it probably adds a bunch of edge cases. So I would imagine that weird stuff can happen when these have different widths, and then trying to find an amount of text that fits perfectly might be a little bit more complicated. So yeah, we just have to see. But yeah, good to know that this exists. There are also text layouts apparently, but I would assume that this, yeah, okay, so this adjusts based on how much text is added, but probably the bounds stay the same to some degree at least. Okay, so the height always stays the same and the width is variable. Let me open an Obsidian doc and write that down. That's not something that I can remember off the top of my head or like that. Okay, so we have like text flow. And text flow means similar to InDesign. Text spans over multiple text frames. And if I now, these can also be empty, and probably if text overflows, it just overflows. Yeah, okay, it just overflows. So this doesn't auto adjust in terms of how big it is in size. Okay, fair enough. So overflow equals overflow no auto height adjustment. Then we had this kind of text layouts right here. So let's make a screenshot of that option. Text layouts. And that, does it always like retain the height? Right. Okay, so this can also do weird stuff, so to speak. But okay, fair enough. Let's see, arch probably the same as a circle. Yeah, also overflows based on the red dot. So yeah, with dynamic, it seems like it adjusted the width, but the height stays the same. So that was the option dynamic frame and text size auto adjust. Height fixed. with variable. All other options are essentially point text that overflows. And what I mean by that is that you can't really specify the height of the, like you can with this, but I mean, of course you can adjust the size, but you can't. To me, it feels more similar to a point text than an area text, so to speak, because it doesn't seem to have any line breaks. So even if I force line breaks into it, it doesn't contain any line breaks. Okay. No line breaks. All right. Then let's continue on in exploring the documentation. But before that, I'll just quickly let my cat into the room because she's currently scratching at the door, and that doesn't really help me concentrating on this. So with that, I'll be back in just a second, and probably my cat will say hello then too, and yeah, then we'll continue on. It will just take half a minute or so. See you in a second. And I'm back, as you can see, now with a companion. And yeah, hopefully that will allow us a little bit more concentrated work. All right, where are we with the text node? All right. Yep, Erin, that's right, cat problems, but yeah, better that way than like, yeah. That's an annoyance I can happily live with. All right. Yeah, we're exploring Express APIs. You want to also build an add-on? All right, text node. A text node represents a text display frame in the scene graph. It may display an entire piece of text or sometimes just a subset of longer text that flows across multiple text node frames. Yeah, that's what we've seen. Perfect. Because of this, the text node does not directly hold the text content and styles. Instead, it refers to a text content model, which may be shared across multiple text node frames. Okay, so essentially, just paraphrasing this, we have an abstraction, so to speak. We don't just have a string of the text within a text node, but we have an abstraction on top of that with a class called text content model, which we'll have to explore next. To create new a single, we have found a typo. Hey to the Adobe folks in the stream, we can fix that. But to create a new single frame piece of text, see editor.createText. Okay, so we can just create new text. That's perfect. APIs are not yet available to create multi-frame text flows. That might be convenient in terms of just not dealing with multi-frame text nodes for now. That might be nice. Yeah. By the way, just. I mean, I'm saying this jokingly, but at the same time, just speaking from experience of also working with customers, both of individualized plugins, but also the products, so the pre-built plugins, so to speak. That just sometimes happens where there might be demand for a feature to be there, but you have to just be like, yeah, that's not supported yet. That's just, I don't think of this as anything bad. That comes with the nature of building plugins and add-ons and integrating in other systems. So with that, really, these kinds of messages of this is not yet available is completely neutral to me. It's neither a negative nor a positive. It's just something where Okay, that's a natural limitation of the platform. I also don't have to try to circumvent this in dozens of ways unless it is really critical for my product. It's just something that I have to deal with, and yeah, so that's not available yet, so that won't be supported in the add-on. No problem with that. And if it at some point gets supported, I might at that point also have a little bit more time to also extend the add-on to include this feature. All right, then we have all the normal stuff again, so to speak. So add-on data, which is still not stable, exactly. All children, plant mode, bounds and parent. We've seen these things before. Okay, full content is then the text content model. The model containing the complete text string and its styles, only part of which may be visible within the bounds of this specific text node frame. Fair? Could be either overflowing or it could be in another frame. The full text content flow may be split across multiple frames and or may be clipped in exactly what I said just now. Using area text layout. Okay, that's also something we have to look into, so I'll just open it in another tab. Note, when traversing the scene graph in search of text content, bear in mind that multiple text nodes may refer to the same single text content model. Make sense? This can give the impression that the same text is duplicated multiple times. Fair enough. It has an ID to determine whether a given piece of text content is unique or if it's already been encountered before. What I'm taking away from this, by the way, is not really what was written there, but more so with this last sentence that we should use the ID if we want to compare different nodes, compare nodes by ID. So with that, I assume that it isn't guaranteed by the APIs that the same node will always refer to the same object in terms of the APIs. So with that, a normal comparison with a triple equals might not work there. So always check with the ID, which, yeah, we can do that. No problem with that. Return string, fair. Layout, get a layout. And it also, we are able to set the layout, which can then determine what kind of text we're dealing with. This, however, is experimental only. That might be interesting. I guess I will have a few points here where I'm just like, that might be interesting, because I'm already imagining like, okay, we have to somehow circumvent this, and at the moment I have no idea if we'll be able to do that, but yeah, as I said, that's the fun of the series. We'll just have to figure it out, and just like any of you building an add-on, I as well will just have to see if I can get around that. Or if not, we have to see how strict the publishing guidelines are, because it says should not be used in any add-ons you will be distributing. And should is not must not. So let's see about that. But hopefully we'll just be able to avoid this somehow. And in that case, we wouldn't have any issue with that at all. So layout, set the layout mode. If this text node is part of a multi-frame text content flow, it must be configured to use area text layout. Fair enough, we've seen that as soon as we have multiple frames. Those were like actual frames. Other layout modes are only available for single frame text. Fair enough. So with that, doesn't allow for point text mode or stuff like that. Throws. If changing text layout to from magic fit or circular layout when the text contains fonts unavailable to the current user. But why would it contain different fonts? Okay, so what did it say? Magic fit. I assume magic fit is this dynamic thing, probably. Let's see. Magic fit. What's magic fit? Magic fit is 3. Great. Area, auto height, auto width, circular, magic fit. Yeah, by me, I would assume that it can only mean this so-called dynamic thing. So with that, let's say dynamic. And now we have some sort of font here, right? To, from. And now I go into a different sort of layout. The font doesn't change, right? So why would that be throwing? Okay, that's an open question that I might have to explore later. So let me just note that down as sort of something that might create weird behavior. We'll get to see later in the series. And then I just want to keep in mind that we already read that that might happen. If a text node is part of a multi-frame text content flow and the layout is not area text layout. Okay, fair. So we have to first set it to area text layout if we want to support multi-frames, which we don't in the beginning anyway. So that's fine. Parameters, yeah, we just pass it the layout and then it returns the layout. Fair. Layout mode of the text node frame. Okay. Locked. We already saw that locking is a little bit more involved, so to speak, because I think, yeah, we could lock it, but still allow editing the text, right? So I'll have to see how that looks like in the APIs. But first of all, we just have Boolean locked. The nodes lock, unlock state. Locked nodes are excluded from the selection and cannot be edited by the user unless they are unlocked first. Cannot be edited by the user. So I would assume that includes by the user using our add-on. So probably we also have to unlock it before we can actually do stuff. Next text node seems quite trivial in the sense that it probably refers to these multi-frame things and still experimental. Opacity, we've seen that. Parent, rotation, rotation in screen. Text, okay, we can also just use a string getter, or we could also set it, but it's deprecated because we should use the text content model. Fair enough. Text alignment, sure. Probably don't have to use the text alignment in our plug or in our add-on because we didn't have to in the plugin. Top left local, fair, transform matrix, translation. We've seen these things. Type is a scene node type, and so probably in this case, or hopefully in this case, it will be text. Type of text node. Yeah, makes sense. Visual effects, experimental, visual root, bounds in node, local point in node. We've seen all these before. Set position in parent, set rotation in parent, and that's it. Okay, so at least we now know like the text node APIs, and we know which potential pitfalls we might have to look into. So yeah, maybe we'll figure some of this stuff out as we continue browsing the documentation, but otherwise we might have to just play around with it within Express once we've built it and yeah, deal with it there, so to speak. Okay, so next up, text content model. And yeah, just as a sort of prediction, I would assume that we'll spend like the next 20 minutes or so still searching through the documentation, and then hopefully we'll be able to use the we hopefully will be able to at least create the project. So creating the boilerplate code, and then maybe we'll also get to experience some of these APIs that we've already seen using the code playground we have within Adobe Express. I was just advised that I'm no longer sharing the screen. No, that's not intentional. Thank you so much for pointing that out. That was very much not intentional. Okay, so maybe the cat actually did interrupt the stream in a sense, but yeah, that should be fixed now. So yeah, well, that's a bummer, but okay, that just happened. So yeah, we just have to deal with it. It's also not too big of an issue. But what I was just saying is that yeah, I've now written down some of these points that might come into play later. And yeah, hopefully we'll be able to set up our project at least today, play around a little bit with the APIs within the code playground, which I activated by going to your add-ons and then code playground, and maybe test some of the hypotheses we created while browsing through the documentation. And then yeah, I guess we won't get to too much more today, but then hopefully in the next weeks we'll get to actually implementing the plugin for the add-on. Still, my mind thinks of plugins. That's on me. For real. So, all right, class text content model represents a complete piece of text content flow, which may be split across multiple text node frames for display. All right, use this model to get or modify the text string and the style ranges applied to it. Yeah, I already know the name style ranges. That was also the case for other apps, for example, in Adobe XD. But mostly with Lorem Ipsum, really, even if we have different style ranges, so even if I now said this wasn't bold and this was underlined, really if I then apply the Lorem Ipsum placeholder text again, what I normally do is I just use essentially the style of the first character within a text layer. So yeah, we probably won't have to deal too much with character style ranges apart from unifying it, so to speak, because obviously it's quite a difficult problem if we try to maintain highlighting a specific word, because you might have already adjusted the text manually, and so with that word would be in a different place, and so long story short, it just doesn't make sense for a placeholder text that should be replaced anyways later in the design process. It just doesn't make sense to deal with that. So yeah, I just remove any kind of style modifications in the plugin and plan to do so in the add-on as well. All text nodes is experimental, which makes sense because the whole multi-frame text node thing is experimental. Character style ranges is also experimental. Okay, so we have to wait and see. But is it only the getting part of it? That would be funny. Because in other places it said the warning for the set part as well. So maybe we can set it but not get it. I have to wait and see about that. The character style. Well, I mean, we also have the apply character styles, but that is also experimental. Yeah. Maybe we can't deal with that anyways for the moment. So, all right, we have some sort of ID, which is also experimental. No, I didn't want to click on requirements. We were with the ID. And then the text is just, it takes a string, it returns a string, and it also, as a setter, takes a string. So yeah, that's pretty trivial, just applying text as expected. So yeah, at least that part, I feel confident that there will be no issues with that, hopefully. So that will be good. And here I think it also says what we pointed out earlier. To determine if two text nodes are connected to the same text content model, check if both models have the same ID. Comparing two models using triple equals will always fail. Okay, so that confirms one of the hypotheses. I've been speaking for too long at this point. The hypothesis I had earlier. So compare nodes by ID. So that was from there. Also, just let me link to this in case I want to refer back to it. That was not where I wanted to go. Here we go. All right. Then we have the text content model. So next up, we had this create text thing. If we want to create a new text node, I would assume. So let's just quickly look at where we are, generally speaking. Okay, we are in some sort of editor class. Presumably that's some sort of global constant for interacting with the editor. And by editor, I mean this whole thing right here. So the document sandbox in a sense. Entry point for APIs that read or modify the document's contents. Yeah, makes sense. Context. User's current selection context. Also something to explore because we have to work with the selection potentially. Document root. Fair enough. We can get to the document root. Create ellipse. I can create an ellipse. I already used that in the one time I built an Express add-on, so to speak, which was when I actually a video that you can find on the same YouTube channel that this live stream is on, which explains the various approaches you can take in terms of boilerplating your add-on. And there we already used this, so that sounds familiar to me, and that's also why I was already hoping that we can just do this with text. We can create a group. Great. Question is, where does this get inserted into? But that's another. Create image container. Fair enough. Bitmap data. Yeah. Create line. Create path. Create rectangle. Create text. Create text returns a text node, which is what we already looked at. So perfect. Returns a text node with default styles. The text content is initially empty, so the text node will be invisible until its full content properties text is set. Makes sense. So we just get the content model, so to speak, and from there we take that. So yeah, that makes sense. Creates point text, so the node's width will automatically adjust to accommodate whatever text is set. So this is similar to point text in Adobe XD. Note the registration point of the text node is not guaranteed to be at the top left of the bounding box of its insertion parent. Recommend using set position in parent over translation to set the position. Okay, fair enough. But I can create text, so presumably even if we want to do the same functionality we had over in Adobe XD, so if we had a rectangle, I don't know if a rectangle, I mean, yeah, I think we had a rectangle right here, right? Yeah, create rectangle. So how do I create a rectangle here? Elements, probably. Shapes? Shapes sounds kind of right. But I don't have a rectangle here. Well, I mean, if we had a rectangle, that would then presumably have some sorts of dimensions in here, and then we could replace that with text. So we can also replicate that functionality, so that's great. So let me just note this down. Where were we? Here, create text. Text creating text for replacing other nodes would also be possible. All right, and then let's continue on. Text content model we already had. Create text we had. Context was the thing that we could get from the editor class. Context contains the user's current selection state, indicating the content they are focused on. Content there. Okay. Fair enough. Hopefully I understood that right. The content they are focused on sounds a little bit weird to me, but it sounds like it's just a selection or the viewport, what's in screen or something like that. Oh, current page, just a page node, the currently viewed page. So yeah, we can have multiple pages. Okay, and we can just view one at a time. So with that, that makes sense that we can get the current page. Has selection. False if the current editable selection does not contain any nodes. otherwise true. Okay, so with that, if I don't have anything selected, I would assume that this returns false. Also, if I have something that's locked selected, I would also assume that this contains false because they are not editable. Maybe, maybe not, but probably also not so important to us because we can just check if a node is locked before manipulating it anyways. Then insertion parent, here we have this weird insertion parent, great. The preferred parent to insert newly added content into. That is the location content would get inserted if a user were to paste or use the shapes panel in the UI. This will vary depending on the user's current selection and other UI state. Okay, so probably we won't be using that because if we want to implement this sort of replace functionality, what we'll probably do is we'll just use essentially the node we want to replace. We get that from the selection, which is hopefully an editable part of the selection. Then we can get the parent of that, remember the position within the parent, and then within that parent hopefully insert that new child. I would hope that we can just, when we then say like create text, that we can somehow place this into a parent. Move from parent. Yeah, maybe, maybe not. We'll just have to wait and see. Where were we? Here. Selection. Okay, selection, read-only node, but it's an array, so it's not only an iterable. That's great. Selection nodes. Okay, we can also set the selection. This is good because it means that if we do this exact scenario of replacing a rectangle, we can make sure that the text area is selected afterwards. I like that. That's the current selection of an array to an array of node, accepts a single node as a shortcut for length 1 array, or undefined as a shortcut for empty array, which clears the selection. Okay. Truthfully, I'm not super happy with these sorts of shortcuts because it only makes things more complicated, but it is what it is. So yeah, once again, that's the sort of thing where when we're integrating into an existing application, we just have to deal with, hey, that's how the API is structured. We can, of course, spend ages complaining about it, but really it doesn't get us anywhere. So yeah, that's just something that I have to keep in mind, because otherwise I will later be confused about, hey, why can I pass different types of parameter here, even though it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, especially because it's a setter. So with that, it's not a method we call in how it looks, but just something where we say, hey, context dot selection equals. So yeah, just something that I have to keep in mind. Only nodes that meet the following criteria can be selected. Nodes must be within the current artboard. Nodes outside the active artboards are filtered out. Okay, what happens if I put something outside the artboard? Nothing, it just snaps back. So presumably it has to keep 1 pixel on the artboard. Which, given that, let me quickly think if there's a scenario that can essentially cause a problem for that. I mean, presumably so, right? If I now create a text, make this quite long, put it so that it's just in the artboard, and then make it shorter, what happens? Okay, I have just created a layer of text that, while I can still select it and then move it, it's kind of in a weird in-between state. So, but yeah, I would consider that to be a bug of Adobe Express itself, so not something I will deal with in my plugin, in my add-on. So if that happens with the add-on, okay, let me quickly think if there's, like, for example, if we use the approach of using 2 words as placeholder text also in this scenario. Let me quickly think. So a user would add some text. Okay, in this case, it's already, I think, yeah, it's already a frame because it's already too long, but let's say they just write something there. I mean, why would they put this here, right? And as long, well, okay, I guess, yeah, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense that a user would put this here, so probably not something I have to deal with, but yeah, that might happen, that then if that became Lorem Ipsum and that was too short, then yeah, weird stuff could happen. That is not intended to be possible to happen within Express. A node cannot be selected if its ancestor is also selected. Descendants are filtered out. Fair enough. So if I group these 2 things, sorry, if I unlock this, group these 2 things, and if I select this, then I can't simultaneously select the group, but it just switches to the group. Make sense? Locked nodes are filtered out, but will still be included in selection, including non-editable. Interesting. Okay. So with that, we can probably take a conscious decision of if we want to work with locked nodes or not. And in this case, I'll just make it easy for now and define that MVP not working with locked nodes, because that in turn also means that we don't have to deal with this sort of locking but allowing text replacements, and just gives us a better minimum viable product definition to work with. With that, then this probably includes locked nodes, right? And any locked nodes. This can happen, for example, if the user clicks on a locked node or if the user drags a selection marquee. Fair enough. So as we just specified, we don't want to work with locked nodes for now, so we can just happily ignore this. And then we have some sort of event handlers which seem to be experimental. Okay. Area text layout. So we had these different text layouts, right? Auto hide text layout and so on. Area text layout is experimental. Okay, all of these are experimental, apparently. Are there any layouts that aren't experimental? Point text layout? No, all of them are experimental. So with that, let's skip these for now. Okay, so let's just try to use the code playground and try to figure out how some of these things then work in practice. So I'll just create a better test document. So this here is point text. Then we have area text. With a bit more content. This was a locked piece of text, and yeah, let's maybe just go into the code playground. Yes, start coding, and we'll probably want to use the document shares, and I'll try to make this bigger because even I can't read anything there at the moment. Even though the screen resolution was already set to smaller for the stream. Okay, here I can't change this. So not there. Reset code, run code, copy. Guess it's not quite so easy, but I can hopefully. Okay, it also captures like the native browser zoom functionality. So let's maybe just try to open the root page of Express, zoom in here. Yeah, let's do it like that. Yeah, that looks better. Let's exit the code playground for now, reopen it. Thanks, Hamza. And yeah, that's at least a little bit more readable. I don't think it's particularly perfect at the moment, but yeah, not really much we can do about that. And yeah, and I also opened the console because hopefully we can just do a little bit of console logging in here. So let's run the code for now. Gosh, this is terrible in terms of readability, but it is what it is. And while we won't create a rectangle here, we can just remove all of this. Add rectangle. We can still keep it as create rectangle. I don't have any issues with that. And yeah, let's just... Okay, we apparently already have the editor, so that just comes off the Express document SDK. And so let's just try and console.log the editor and see what we can find there. So run the code, create the rectangle, and oh yeah, I have to deselect selected context only. Or do I find the context right now? Yeah, no, I really don't have. I really don't want to look through all of these. So let's just not isolate the context. So okay, so we have our editor, we have our context as expected. We have this create text function that we already looked at in the documentation. Let me just make a screenshot of that just to also have it in my document. So that is the editor, I think. Then we can look at the context. The context then also contains a selection. It has a selection, currently no, okay. If I select this like semi-locked node, will it still say no or false? So let me just quickly rerun this. So let's go into the context. Has selection false, even though we have this selected. So yes, this locked state actually counts as locked. That's good. So that's also learning. How was this called? Lock allow text replace. Lock allow text replace is still considered to be locked by the APIs and not included in context.selection. Yeah, and as you can see, really all I'm doing here is I discussed the questions that came to my mind earlier while browsing through the documentation, and all I'm doing now is just essentially trying to confirm some of my suspicions, maybe get an answer to some of my questions, and yeah, so... Oh, I don't want to open this because it takes way too much screen real estate. I also don't want to learn more. Hello, thank you. And then if I now have this in my selection, yeah, it's an array where the first thing that is hopefully then a text node, I would assume. So maybe. So yeah, it has this full content, which then also has our text. Yeah, that looks great. So with that, let me quickly screenshot that as well. Selection with area text. And presumably then this also has a text type or something like that. Layout. Experimental API is not supported, so with that we can't even determine the layout right now. Let me think, is this a problem for us? Maybe. Type is just a text node, right? Visual effects isn't interesting. Do I have some other way to figure out if this is a point text or an area text? Because this fundamentally changes how we can apply placeholder text in the end. So this may be a point where we have to look into using experimental APIs. So yeah, let me also quickly note this down. Text node.type, and that's a getter. So get text node.type throws if experimental APIs are disabled. Problem for add-on ? Might have to use this anyways. Yeah, and that could actually be like quite a big, not really a problem per se, but just something that could make a huge difference on how we can build this add-on. So with that, that's something that I want to get an answer to right now before we continue on. So let's see. Let me first of all see if we get any information about how bad, quote unquote, experimental APIs actually are. So if there is like a hard requirement in the marketplace, yeah, this flag is only allowed during development and needs to be removed during submission. Okay, that's unfortunate. So this might actually be one of the cases where we then have to look into experimental ways around figuring this out without accessing the API. So let me just think about this for a second. If I now store this as a global variable for now, we cannot at the moment. Maybe if I try this again. Oh yeah, let's maybe just do it like that. So const text node equals, what did we say? Editor.context dot selection dot. So this is 0. We know this exists as text node, I think. And that we have to import from somewhere, but that's not an issue, hopefully. Can we import it from here? Yeah, perfect. So this is a text node. Yeah, I know that we can. Okay, we're in JavaScript land. That's unfortunate. So type text node. So with that, I just specified that this text node is a text node, so that we get auto completion from TypeScript. And now let's say under the assumption. Let's simplify this a little bit. Let's for now work under the assumption that we're only using this default text layout. In that case, we would only have 2 text types, I think. No, we have 3 text types, right? We have this is like an auto height text, so to speak. So it has an automatic height. Can it also be with a custom height? Let me see. Let's quickly make this smaller. If I now have a bit of text here, and I say that even, yeah, I don't want this to be a text flow, but so if I did this, yeah, that still has an automatic height, so to speak. What I'm currently trying to figure out is if we can maybe adjust or micro adjust the content of a text node and through that, and whether that changes the width or the height of the text node, figure out what type of layout it uses without actually using this layout type API. Because if we cannot do that, then we would either have to use the experimental APIs, which we cannot for the moment, or alternatively, all we can do would be to let the user specify how many words they want to have of placeholder text, and the whole essentially placeholder text that adjusts to the size of the text box idea would be out of the window, which is also a possibility. Let me be clear about that. I'm essentially trying to, and we're now entering dark mode because it's getting late here, because we're just trying to figure out how we can make this work for Express. And it might be that at the moment, and I have to be open about this, and to this idea, it might just be that for the moment, this would be how Lorem Ipsum for Express has to work, because we don't have the other option. But to me, that sort of plugin always felt not intuitive enough, or not, how should I say it, not muscle memory-like enough. And what I mean by that is, if I want to insert placeholder text, I really don't want to think about, hey, I need this and this much text, because that to me just doesn't make a ton of sense. If I want to insert placeholder text, I want to specify, hey, this is the dimension it takes up in my layout, and then I want to apply text to it. Done. I don't want to think about, hey, this is probably 200 words, so with that was always really appealing to me. And if I can somehow get this into Express, I would like to do that, because that really, in a lot of ways, is how my Lorem Ipsum plugin stood out from the quote-unquote normal placeholder text plugins that were available for other software at the time I developed it. So yeah, if I can find a way to implement this here, then I will do that. But for the moment, it doesn't look particularly promising. Let me have a look at the APIs again. Text node, so we could try to set a position, I guess, but that also doesn't change the size. Do we even have any access to the size at all? Is now the next question, because layout, because I think this was only part of the layouts, right, that we had access to, like width and height. Yeah, so it might be that we don't have access to these things at all without the experimental APIs. Let's have a look again at what this looked like. So let's just, okay, let me just quickly, I have to keep this open and then create rectangle, and then let's have a look at that again. Selection. Layout we can't use, we already figured that out. Local point in node probably doesn't give us a whole lot to work with. Rotation is great, but doesn't get us a whole lot. Setting those also doesn't make a lot of sense for us. Translation is also just a position, from what I can tell. Type, get, I mean, we do have the bounds, so probably we could at least get these parameters. So presumably, and we probably have to check this with the code because these are properties. So let's say console log text node dot bounds in parent. It doesn't matter for the moment. which of these we use. And then I would like to open this add-on again. Is it here somewhere? Yeah, no, sorry, that's something that's something different. Is it running somewhere? Am I missing something? Could not find export text node in module express document. Well, then the types are wrong, apparently. That's unfortunate. Or maybe we can just say, or no, we can't actually import it that way. So let's just do it. Ah, right. Okay, so it's only an interface. It isn't actually a class. It's just an interface. It doesn't have any value associated to its type. Interesting. Also something to note down. Classes in documentation are just interfaces. Import text node from, what was it? Express document SDK throws as it doesn't have any value. Not classes with constructors. Okay, yet another lesson learned, I guess. So that's also good in the sense that we do want to make this lessons learned session at the end, and maybe that can even become a blog post on the tech blog or something like that. So yeah, the more we learn here, the more all of you and of course everyone else in the community can work with too. So we still hopefully get our type completion. Okay, so we have X, Y, and we actually get the width and the height, which is good because it means that if what I described previously were to work, we at least have the data we need for that. So let me see. Presumably, I could now, for example, take so what's the text node we had here? So that's currently so this should adjust in the height if I manipulate the text. Okay, so with that, my hypothesis would now be that we can say something like previous height equals this thing right here, dot height. Then we can say text node dot full content dot text equals text node dot full content dot text plus a lot of text. So in theory, this could be just a lot more text so that we definitely fill up a whole line. And then we take the new height, and of course these are new variables, so const new height equals text node dot bounds and parent dot height, and then presumably we could say if our previous height doesn't equal our new height, that means we have an area text auto height, I guess. And it might still be other things, so I'm not fully sure yet if we can make this work end to end, so to speak, and cover all the different cases. But yeah, as I said, these things do happen in development, and so it's just another part of the stream. So in this case, we would have point text, presumably, because the height didn't adjust, even though the text got longer. So by definition, this means that it got wider in terms of width, which only auto adjusts for point text. So point text, yeah, let's try that and see what happens. So here we have, yeah, this is no longer point text. So this would be point text, right? So if I create the rectangle, then it says point text. And of course I would have to change this back. So let's quickly change this back. Const previous text equals text node dot full content dot text. And this is then also the previous text. And then at the end of all of this, we can say text node dot full content dot text equals the original text, so the previous text. And so hopefully this should no longer change our document. So if I click this, it says it doesn't change anything, but it says point text. And hopefully if I now select area text, it says area text auto hide. Now, of course, there could be a lot of edge cases here. So for example, with the text layouts, we will also detect something. So if I now click this, it thinks this is area text. But hey, it is at least something that, well, I do have to look into edge cases of this. It might mean that it's still possible to follow the original plan. So yeah, let me quickly also copy this over to my notes just so that I have this saved even if we close this tab. So this would be JavaScript, and then yeah, I don't need all these empty lines in between. So yeah, if this, then this was this. So let me quickly format this. All right, so this would be alternative to experimental APIs. Probably has tons of edge cases called, but for but in case we need it or something like that. Okay, so that's something we figured out. That's great. So let me quickly look through my notes again and just look into whether there are things that I wanted to figure out as well. So let's maybe say, okay, we can actually use experimental APIs for now. And I think we can activate this somewhere here. Yeah, experimental APIs, we can activate this, which then is reflected in our manifest file. Apply this, run it again. And then I would like to figure out how, like, under the assumption that we can use them at some point, sooner or later, hopefully we would be able to at least figure out which of these corresponds to which API option. So let's quickly change this again. So, okay, we still console log the editor, but let's just also console log our text node. Console.log text node. Run code. Select a basic text. Create rectangle. This is our text node. And so hopefully now we should get a layout, which is of type 1. So type 1 is text node type. C node type. Oh, right, that's the C node type. So I think I need layout, right? Yeah, right, it was layout. I selected layout, but searched for type. That's great. So let's see what we have here. Point text layout. Would have an auto width thing. So let's see here. Okay, so we have the width with type 1. Would that match this? Not really. So it's not a point text layout, I can tell you that much. It could be auto hide text layout, which would make sense because this is an auto hide text layout. So yeah, presumably that's just an auto hide text layout. What other text layout things do we have? Document APIs, interfaces. And then we have area text layout. In which case do we get the area text layout? So this would contain a width and a height. And presumably it would only happen for... And type would be... here we have the types. Okay, so let's see. 1 was auto height. Okay, so auto width would presumably be for point text. So let's try that. Point text has a layout of type 0. So that would be auto width. Perfect. So point text. Then circular, I think, is probably pretty much anything in here that isn't the dynamic option. So if we have this, sorry, let's just print this out here. That's easier. So let's also console.log text node.layout, just for convenience. So we have a circle, which has the type 4, so circular as expected, and probably the other circle things, so the arch and so on, also have 4. Yeah, that's type 4, perfect. That's type 4. Then this one is type 3, which would be the magic fit, perfect. So text flow presumably then is type 2. Yes. Okay, so let me quickly document this. So that's not what I wanted. Where did my Chrome window go? Did I just close this? That would be annoying. Oh well, then let's just reopen it, I guess. Okay, so... Which also means we just lost the Express window, but I think we can make this work at this point. So let's see. Where were we? Document sandbox, document APIs, into constants probably. Text type. Yeah, so let's just quickly go back into Adobe Express. And I just want to make screenshots now. I don't actually need the code playground anymore. So it's a good thing that I copied this over to Obsidian, I guess. So, default. This is either... This is one of these two. Is depending on whether a width is set one of these two. Then let me make a screenshot of these. Open this in my screenshot editor. And then circular. Right, I think I just lost the other screenshot, which is kind of annoying, but oh well. Add a capture. Okay, so here, add a capture of this thing right here. And then I can just quickly take notes here. So circular. Okay, guess I can't do it like that, but that's fine. So all of these were circular. And then we have another thing from our documentation, which is the magic fit, which comes in here. And then we can just draw arrows here. All right. Not something I can copy over into my notes. And then, yeah, the other one is basically clear. Area corresponds to multi-frame text content. Okay, so at least those were open questions that we've now answered. If changing text layout to from magic fit or circular when the text contains fonts unavailable to the current user. I don't even know how I should test this. Like, even if I wanted to test this, that would just, like, that wouldn't even work from the very beginning in my mind. So I'll just accept this message, but really, still, I have no idea what this means. And also, at least at the moment, I don't know how to test this or to essentially test around this to figure it out. Creating text would also be possible. Great. We've not tried that, but I think we have at least seen that. Editor. All right. We have these things. Log is still considered to be logged. Yes. Selection with area text. We had that. Throws if experimental. We saw that. We saw a potential workaround. Yeah, so I think at least we don't have any more open questions from browsing the documentation. So that's good. And yeah, since we only have a couple of minutes left for today, what I still want to do is just to set up the project and maybe push it to GitHub so that we can then really dive into starting to actually develop it next time. So, I mean, we already worked on this. All, of course, is part of the development cycle, but you know what I mean. I'm like just really getting started, diving into actually implementing some things. So let's go to Bold Express because yeah, I think we'll just use Bold now. That sounds like a good idea. And in that case, maybe if Justin, you're in the stream, thank you so much for building Bold. So yeah, let's just get started there. We have to use pnpm create Bold Express. I already ran this a couple of weeks ago. So let's just go one folder outside, maybe create a new directory with Express add-ons, just to have a little bit better separation of my projects. No package.json was found. Do I need a package.json for that? Let me just try it with npx, because that feels like that's not the... Yeah, that works. So where do you want to create your project? That would be the Lorem Ipsum add-on. A unique display name, Lorem Ipsum. Unique ID. So for now, let's just think of an ID. If it works similarly to UXP, we'll have to change this to an auto-generated ID provided by Adobe at some point. But for now, let's just use the reverse domain name, schema, de, Zuri, Klaschka, Express, Lorem Ipsum. I think I want to use React. and I've never used Svelte, and I'm already in a new environment. And the last time I've used Vue, it didn't go so well. I mean, I think Vue is great, but it just doesn't match my style of development. So let's go with React, install the dependencies. Yes. Do I want to keep sample code snippets? No. Maybe I'll regret that decision. In that case, I'll just reinitialize it. So yeah, let's see. Installing the dependencies. Also, I'll make that a little bit bigger. All right, new major version of NPM available, so be it. But yeah, in that case, we now have the Lorem Ipsum add-on. And then we can also open this in Visual Studio Code. Yes, I trust the authors. Okay, let's see what we have here. We have a README that tells us a few things. So maybe let's just look at this. Yeah, I mean, I think that's just a README from the repository. So yeah, first of all, the dependencies were already installed. Build the add-on, must be run before dev, can also run after for panel to work statically without the process. Fair enough. So let's just run npm run build. Okay, the build ran through, and also we have at least some things in here. Presumably this source code would be the stuff that's in our document sandbox, and source is essentially our UI or front-end side, so to speak. And then let's see, set up keys for development. I think I already did that, only once per dev machine. First time, yeah, I'm pretty sure I already did that. So if you want to see how that looks like, you can just watch the YouTube video that's on this very YouTube channel around different ways of getting started with building add-ons for Adobe Express, where I think I demonstrated this step as well. Run the add-on in hot reload mode for development. First time you run yarn dev, you will be prompted to make a dev cert. Fair enough. Okay, so let's just do that. npm run dev and see if that works. Okay, so now we have a Vite server running. So presumably, if I go back into Express and make this a little bit smaller again, because we don't need the document sandbox anymore, add-ons, your add-ons, and if I now go to add-on testing, 5241, I understand the risks of loading my own add-on. Okay, so now we have Lorem Ipsum here. We can click on Lorem Ipsum. And I mean, we don't have the sample code, of course, but we have our Lorem Ipsum plugin. And let's see if I now make any changes in here. So let's just say source, index react tsx. Okay, we have an app. That's great. And then let's just, for the sake of it, h1 hello Lorem Ipsum. Hot module reload update sounds promising, and we actually have hello Lorem Ipsum. Okay, so we actually have our boilerplate set up. So let me quickly also push this into a GitHub repository. Let me think about the license I want to add here first, probably. And just make a quick adjustment to the README. So Lorem Ipsum add-on for Adobe Express. Work in progress. See streams on Adobe Developers YouTube channel. Add a quick license. New file. License. Let's see, are there any license specifications in here? Not that I can see. So yeah, hey, hopefully I won't do a mistake here, but otherwise I'll adjust this, of course. I don't want to break any sort of licensing things. So yeah, of course, if I make any mistakes here on the fly, then we can still fix them. But let's just make an MIT license. Let's get the text of that. Copy that over. License 2024. Oh, we have 2025. Still want to write 2024, but oh well. Zuri Klaschka. So that's the license. We have our README. We have our main.tsx. So I think everything should be good to go to be published. Do we actually have a git ignore in here? No, we do not. So let's see. Probably we want the same things as in this npm ignore, I would assume. So let me just copy this over. And also that is something that I can probably change afterwards. But now we have a git ignore. So let's stop the development server, git init this repository, initialize the git repository. So let's see what kind of files it wants to add. GitHub workflows sounds good. I don't know what the workflow does. Oh, it's some sort of auto release. Great. Public zip sounds good. Shared sounds good. Source code. Yeah, we can keep these for now. Source code, license, and so on and so on. All of that looks good. So yeah, let's just git add dot, git commit, initial commit. The journey of the add-on is getting started. And then what I want to do is just create a public GitHub repository, and then almost perfectly in time, we will also be able to call it a day for now. So Lorem Ipsum add-on. We don't want a template. I'll leave the description empty for now. I don't want to add anything else. And then we will git remote add origin and so on and so on. And we will git push -u origin main. Sounds good. Okay, so we have this public. So with that, after every stream, you'll also be able to just take a look at the code we've built. And yeah, with that, I think that concludes today's stream. It's perfectly on the mark of 7 p.m. Central European time. So with that, we're perfectly in time. I thank you so much for joining me today. The links to the future streams were also shared in the chat already. So with that, really, there's nothing for me left to do than call this a day. I'm looking forward to have you join the next streams potentially as well. And yeah, see you there. And hopefully you'll also have success with your add-on development projects. I haven't thought of anything to say at the end of the stream. So yeah, let's just keep it at that. Thanks so much. See you. Have a great week, and see you next week.